Do you like this music? I don't. I just put it in because all of the people in this film are Asian. Or part Asian. Whatever that means. Asian. I guess I have mixed feelings about that word. Anyway, every film you ever saw about Asian people has to have Oriental music in it somewhere. So I thought I'd get it out of the way here. My name is Mikko Jokela, and the first thing I want to tell you is that this isn't a documentary. Documentaries are supposed to be objective and informative. I'd like to think that this film is informative, but I'm not sure how objective it is. This film also isn't a film. It was all shot on video because it's cheaper. Anyway, this video has 5 people in it. Eric, Sheila, Vivian, Clint, and Cindy. They all happen to be of mixed Asian ancestry, so I guess what you're about to see is a little bit about that. But to be honest with you, these are all people I know from UC Berkeley. So the experiences of these people can't be taken as the truth for all mixed-race people. As my chemistry professor would say, it's not exactly an objective, scientific sample. Actually, I'm lying. I've never taken chemistry in college because it's too hard. Oh, and I guess I should tell you that I'm part Asian also. Half Finnish and half Chinese to be exact. That is, if it's possible to be exact when it comes to race.
About how race is a socially constructed concept, which, in other words, it's an idea that people made up and people continue to make up. It's a social process, and I think that on the one hand, it was a way to try to explain differences that people were seeing, phenotypic differences, cultural differences, but it's also become a way of explaining and justifying inequality. And if every culture, every society has its sort of own understanding of race and ethnicity, and if you trace the American cultural understanding of race and ethnicity backwards to its origins, you find that that it's rooted in sort of Western European colonial sort of period where there was a real need to explain why it was okay to justify going in and colonizing different parts of the world. And so right from the very beginning of the concept of race in that context was the concept of mixed race, and the idea that this was not a good thing, that this was going to harm the human species, that it was going to be bad for all the people involved, as well as sort of the larger population of humans, and the concepts of hybrid degeneracy, and the whole idea around whiteness, the purity of white purity sort of being tainted and therefore brought down to sort of the level of the colored group. This made it an imperative to keep people from crossing these, color lines in terms of, marriage and sex and having children. Mixed race people are a constant threat to sort of the way that things are done. because they're there to mess things up. They're there to remind everybody that the whole concept of race is not biologically concrete, that there is nothing so different about these different groups of people that they can't make babies, that they can't procreate.
I'm half white and half Korean, and my mother's Korean and my father was white. They met on a blind date, and for some reason fell in love and got married. And
Tell the story of the blind date.
oh well, my mother she found it hard to find Korean guys in SoCal at the time because there weren't a lot. So she started dating just sort of Asian guys. And so she was sort of dating this Japanese guy. And they were supposed to go on another date. And so she gets in the car, and he opens the door for her to the back seat. So he gets into the car, and she gets in the car, and my future dad is sitting in the back seat, and there's this woman up front sitting with the Japanese guy. And apparently, like, they'd been living together, and she found out about the date. So she decided to crash it using my dad. And so they met, they had the date. My mother was really confused, and then they ran into each other again. My father was a fraternity boy, and him and some of his brothers decided to crash an international student party. So under the name tag, he wrote Russian. And so he came in, and my mother was there talking to some guy, and he sat down in between them. And for some reason, she liked him. And so they got married a couple years later. And
Was he drunk at the time?
I believe so.
And my grandmother on my mother's side, she did a lot of detailed work with embroidering, and so did my mom to help her out. And what my mom would do is go over to my father's factory, pick up a couple different fabrics, and then take them back to her mother, and they would get that done. And just one day, my dad, said, "Hey, would you like me to take you home? I'll take you in a taxi." And he took her home, and from there they started going out. And the first time my mom was ever called his girlfriend is basically they went to a large festival where a lot of Korean and Argentinian children did a lot of things together. So you saw the Argentinian kids singing in Korean and Korean kids singing in Spanish. And one of my father's friends came up and said, "Oh, who's this?" And he introduced, "Oh, this is my girlfriend."
My name is Clint Ottesen. It's a Danish name. My father is Dane-Irish and my mother is Chinese. They met in Taiwan when right after Vietnam War, where my father was on R&R, and he was just traveling the islands, and he met my mother at kind of like a restaurant bar type place where she was a waitress. And they just liked each other and got together.
I don't know much about their life before me. You know?
We live in different worlds, come from different races.
Oh, honey, I want you to be my wife.
But what would happen to our children? What would they be?
What would they be? They'd be half Japanese, half American. They'd be half yellow and half white. They'd be half you, they'd be half me. That's all they're gonna be.
I guess I feel most Japanese whenever I'm with my mom. That's fairly natural. And in terms of what I was taught or how that was articulated to me, growing up, it really wasn't. They never really made a conscious effort to tell me that I'm this and I'm that. They said that at some point, from time to time, but in terms of like how I was brought up, they didn't. I don't think they ever tried to bring me up as a mixed child. They definitely made me realize that I was different from other people, but that was okay and that was great. Sometimes people call me a mama's boy. So, like, for girls over to the house, to my apartment, like that for the first time, and she just seeing me around the house, and she's like, damn, you're, it's like, because I'm fairly neat. And I notice sometimes I pick up habits that my mom would do, little things she'd do, and it just pissed me off. Like, Mom, and now I find myself doing them. And a lot of them are very, quote-unquote, Japanese type things, in terms of, well, the things that get on my nerves are just this idea of total cleanliness or neatness and order, because, I fold my socks a certain way, and if people are in my house and they don't, it's always, you put things exactly where you found the way it was, the cap not slightly turned, it's got to be, if it was on, it's totally on. Just picking lint off my clothes sometimes, I'd be sitting there talking. From my dad, it's more subtle, We rarely talk about how it is to be like a black man in America. We don't. Now we have some of those conversations, but now I'm 26, and the relationship is very different. It's almost not even father son. It's friend. But things I did pick up from him were definitely. He's always very kind to people. I used to, one of the stories, I used to always wonder, until I was about 10 when I finally asked him, because up until then, we'd be walking down the street, and there'd be some other black person who would walk by, right? And until I was about 10 or 11, I thought my dad knew every single other black person in America. You know what I'm saying? I used to think that, because we'd be anywhere we would be, just be walking down the street, and my dad's, how you doing? Fine. Oh, yeah, you too, but all right, take it easy, And I go, oh, who's Dad? Oh, just a friend. Okay. Dad, do you know him? No. You seem to know him, Dad. Like, oh no, just some guy. Okay. And this happened for 10, 11 years. And I was like, Dad, why do you say hi to everybody? He didn't say hi to everybody. It's just in African American community, it's this thing. It's if you make eye contact, you nod your head, you say, what's up, how you doing? What I felt my identity has never changed, but just the way I've sort of described it has changed. So I used to say I'm Japanese and black, or I'm black and Japanese, or I'm half this and half that. And then I guess at some point in college or something like that, I started saying 100% and 100% just to emphasize the fact that it's only that even if, I might be only biologically or by blood, half this or half that, I'm no less, black or no less Japanese than any person that's full-blooded. And so.
A woman stops you on the street, squints at your face curiously, and pauses for a second. She's not trying to be mean, and it doesn't necessarily hurt your feelings or make you mad, but it happens all the time. Then she says it. What are you?
While phenotype has been found to definitely have a relationship to how a person identifies, it's not a predictable relationship in the sense that sometimes a person will say that because of the way they looked, being very white, for example, they had to, over-identify as a person of color, a black person or as an Asian person or whatever. They had to be sort of 150% and prove it all the time. And so they had to take on sort of, more stereotypically black mannerisms, or, for example. On the other hand, there's people who say, well, because I looked white, I just passed. I never really thought of myself as an Asian American, and nobody treated me as an Asian American, and just, so I haven't really thought of myself that way. So it goes both ways, and also for people who say that they've looked very Asian, and therefore, sometimes it's therefore I feel Asian. I am Asian. Everywhere I've gone, I've always been Asian. And sometimes it's more like, well, I look very Asian, but I feel very, American inside or white inside or whatever. And so while there is a definite relationship, it's not predictable. It can go either way.
Growing up in Florida, I stuck out really bad because everyone was white. And so I grew up, my father passed away when I was 2, so it was just my mother and I. So I grew up with Asian family in an all-white community, and so I identified very strongly as Asian because I was called names like Chink and Jap, and up through my senior year in high school. So when people would say, oh, are you Chinese or Japanese, I'd say I'm Korean. So until I was about 17 years old, I identified as Korean. And I decided that I wanted to go to California because that's where all those Asian people were. So I wouldn't stick out anymore. I wouldn't get like, how do you like our country, or can you catch a fly with chopsticks? It sort of separated me in a way. I mean, I was different, but it sort of made me more determined to sort of, I don't know, fit in a way, because I look different. And the stereotype of Asians in Florida is like nerd, into like science, don't have a life, and weird. And I didn't want to fit that stereotype, so I sort of went the other way and decided to go the social route. And it made me really self-conscious about the way I looked, because I felt that looking different was a bad thing. When I was really little, at first, I don't really have a recollection of thinking that I looked different. And until I got older, I would forget that I wasn't white, because everyone I looked at was white. So I would sort of, I'd be rudely reminded by being, I guess, made fun of. And so moving to California, I went to my first Korean Student Association meeting, and a girl turned and looked at me, and she's like, why are you here? You're not Korean. And there was shockwaves, and my whole life changed. And suddenly I realized I didn't look Korean, because I thought I was the epitome of Korean, because everyone thought I was so Asian, and I could do with chopsticks. I know a lullaby or two. It was I was Korean. No one ever questioned me when I said I was Korean. And just to have it in your face after 17 years of identifying one way, and then all of a sudden finding out you're not that. My big thing was well, if I go to a place where everyone's white, no one's going to think I'm white. And if I go to a place where everyone's Korean, no one's going to think I'm Korean. And since white, per se, is the dominant culture, people fall to their minority groups, I guess, for support. And when your minority group looks at you and says, you're not one of us, then that's really disconcerting. I don't know. And I got really bitter. And I got really angry at my mother. First, for marrying a white man, how dare she? And secondly, although she raised me in a somewhat Korean household, she never taught me the language. She basically wanted me to be the all-American girl. She didn't want to teach me Korean because she didn't think it would help me any in life. She was an immigrant, and she was a fresh off the boat person, and she wanted her girl to be all American, and as apple pie. And what she never really took into account is where I lived, I wasn't all American.
I'd say I'm Argentinian Korean, and I say that because although I was raised with my mother, because my parents got divorced, and I'm very Latina inside in my customs and the way that I am, I still phenotypically look very Asian. And so that definitely plays into the reasons why I identify myself as a Korean as well as an Argentinian. Growing up in an area, I went to school in Monterey Park, well, the city next to Monterey Park, which is Alhambra. And Monterey Park is now known as this suburban Chinatown. So there were a lot of Asians. And my high school was basically half Asian and half Latina. And most of my friends were Filipino. It's kind of like this mixed culture already. So I think I fit in that way because I saw within the Filipino culture a lot of what my family is kind of like. I've got this Asianness because when people see me, they would treat me as an Asian, or they would just easily identify me as one. But inside I also felt that I've got this Latino culture with me too, and this Filipino culture sort of infused both of them. Growing up with my mom, it was really important for her to preserve her Argentinian culture. So we went to an Argentinian school for 10 years, every Saturday morning from 9 to 1, and it was fine. I didn't feel out of place or anything like that. You know, it's not like I experienced racism within that. It was just really accepted. And I mean, I don't think I came to any terms with this whole racial thing until I came to college, because it wasn't such a big issue in high school, whereas it has been in college.
Why?
Because you walk down, I mean, going to UC Berkeley, and you walk down Sproul, and you see how every Asian group, every ethnic group is sectioned off into their own areas. It makes you now have to think, where do I fit in? And I always say this, that when I came up here to Berkeley, you know, I thought, okay, great, I'm going to be able to join a Korean club so I can learn more about my Korean culture, and I can also join a Latino club, because then I can preserve that side of me as well. Well, it was interesting because, I mean, even though I don't know Korean, I was a lot more readily accepted by the Korean community or the Asian community, simply because of, maybe because of the way I look. I'm not positive. But going into the Latino community was different. First of all, because it's very Chicano-based, and I'm not Chicana. I consider myself Latina. So that was one problem. And the other is because of the way I look. You know, I can't imagine myself going into a mecha meeting or chale meeting and saying, hi, I'm here to, you know, check out your club or something. And they'll be like, who the hell are you and why are you here? In terms of presenting myself, I think I always try to push the Latina side of me in a lot of ways. Like if, let's say I go to a cafe and the person behind the counter speaks Spanish and I know it, I'll purposefully, you know, go and say, oh, can I have a coffee in Spanish? So that person will know and be like, oh, you speak Spanish. Oh, did you learn it in school or something? I'll be, no, my mom's Argentinian and all this stuff. And it's really fun to do that. And it can be frustrating at times too, because, you know, I want to just be able to not have to explain to people that I'm also Latina, not just Asian, but it's just something you deal with. It's not that big of a deal.
People, when they look at me, say, you look classically, you have the classical mixed look with an Asian and a Caucasian, you know? When they look at me, they say, there are certain features about you that I definitely think are Asian, certain features that I think are Caucasian. I was never thought of as white or Asian. Never. No one ever thought I was one or the other. They might have thought I was Hawaiian or Filipino or Mexican or something, you know, depending on if it was summer and if I went to the beach a lot or whatever. But that's not a slur at all, you know, it's just dark skin. So, but what I'm trying to say is they basically just thought of me as Hapa. And so, as Hapa, where does that leave me? You know, what do I say? I'm Hapa. I mean, I've done that, but it's difficult because it's like there's nothing really to cling to. You know, there is no Hapa race, you know? There will be in about 40 years because I think there's going to be a huge Hapa population in America. But right now, when I do that, I feel completely alone, or I have felt. And I guess that's fine because I guess we all are alone. We're all individuals, and you get to know each and every one of us on that. What makes you anything, you know? I guess, you know, when I said I considered myself Asian American, I would say what I'm really trying to say is that I was brought up, in my opinion, the same as most Asian Americans are brought up. Just exposed to the same sort of things, you know? Just being in America, I don't know, you know, a lot of people say, okay, well, a lot of Asian Americans, you know, or American-born Chinese, whatever, you know, they lose their roots, they lose this and that and everything because they just, you know, they want to be like everyone else in America, you know? And I experienced that too, but at the same time, I still, you know, I still felt like there was a large part of me that wasn't Caucasian, you know? And I feel that it's much more in that direction than it is towards the Caucasian direction because I didn't have the father or my father's family there to influence me as much. Of course, I had all my friends and my, you know, wrestling coach and things like that were, and, you know, but my mother, who's the person I interacted with the most, was Chinese. You know, there are days when I think, yeah, I'm just your average white guy, you know? And then there are the days when I think I'm not. Football, wrestling, baseball, and track, all those, you know, different things that I kind of participated in. I thought they were very American things. And football is, and baseball is, definitely baseball. And, you know, just the way, you know, just being brought up in our, you know, our generation with the Saturday morning cartoons and everything, you know, you just equate these things with being American. And when you say American, most people think Caucasian, you know, although that's, you know, it's not true. But, you know, in that sense, you know, I mean, there are times when I would think about my dad playing baseball. You know, he taught me how to throw a curveball once when I went to visit him. And I think, you know, my dad, you know, and that's American, you know, and here I am doing the same thing. So, yeah, you know, I eat apple pie.
But on the days that you didn't, then what would that be like?
Days that I don't is when I go snowboarding with my friends and we pass by, or an Asian American driver cuts us off and they say nip or chink or whatever, and I say, man, either you guys totally think I'm white or you just accept me as white, but I do not feel a part of you. Those are the days when I say I'm like him, you know. That's something that actually happened. Days like that. Or when I listen to you know, a Chinese song, you know, that I understand, and I say, man, I totally relate to this, you know, this is what I am.
This is what I mean when I say that these ideas that started, you know, right in the 1600s and 1700s are still around today. I think there is sort of this dual image of mixed race people as being the best of both worlds and the worst of both worlds. And sort of, you know, on the one hand, there's these images in American society today that these mixed race people, you know, are so lucky because they're so beautiful and they can sort of travel in and out of different social groups and always kind of fit in, and they're bilingual maybe, or, you know, bicultural, all of these different ideas that are considered to be the, you know, the way of the future, that these kids are somehow better suited for a multicultural, diverse society. And then at the same time, there's still these ideas of, yes, but they won't fit in anywhere, you know, they're going to be lonely, they're going to be confused, they're not going to know which group to align with politically or which culture to, you know, take on, or they're always going to be a little bit off. And so, you know, both of these images, and there's truth to both of the images too, but I think our culture sort of goes from one to the other and doesn't allow for the possibility that it's just a whole lot more complex.
When I came to terms with myself, it was basically, I started at the point where I finished at the point I started at, which is basically, there's a whole lot of questions. And I thought I had answered a whole bunch of them. You know, I covered the whole spectrum from, well, I'm American, no, I'm Chinese, you know, no, I'm just both, and I'm not two halves, I'm two wholes. And then just back to the same point, which is, you know what, I really don't know. You know, I'm just me.
In terms of race and looking at mixed race people, I think a lot of times we're looked at as the cultural bridges between different groups. And that's a really hard position to put someone, because why should I have to be the cultural bridge for people? Why can't they just sit with each other and talk to each other and figure out what's going on, instead of having to bring in this third person who, yes, has connections to both communities, but shouldn't have to be the person facilitating the discussion. And it's going to take a long time, I think, before people can get beyond the whole race issue and just look at everyone else as an equal person, as someone who is capable of talking to you and working through things. So we'll see how that goes.
It makes you realize that it's all silly, and that all these people like making you put yourself into a box, only pick one. Like, what's the point of that? If you looked at me and you're like, okay, you're gonna pick one, so let's pick out your features here. If you tried to pull out what in me is Korean and what in me is white, like, you're gonna end up with like this like disintegrated pile of a person. Like, you can't pull me apart. I am one person.
I identify myself as 100% black and 100% Japanese.
My dad is 6 feet tall and bald. My mom is 5 feet tall with beautiful, long black hair. My older brother is 5 feet 10 and already losing his hair like my dad. This is me. I'm 5 feet 6 inches tall. I always say that my brother was given the height, so in the interest of genetic equality, I should get to keep the hair. According to the rest of the world, my parents are pure race, while my brother and I are mixed race. I feel bad for my parents that they have to be pure race. It must be hard to figure out exactly what that means. My dad always tells me that he's actually Chinese, even though he's Finnish. You see, Finland is connected to Asia up there to the north of the Arctic Circle, and there's no telling how many times some brave, beautiful Chinese people came across the frozen fields to have sex with the beautiful Laplanders of Finland. When I think of this image, I always imagine these weather-beaten Asian males embracing supple, blonde women. On the one hand, I think that this is kind of a cool vision, because you just never see an Asian male get a blonde girl in the American media, or any media for that matter. On the other hand, it's sexist. Anyway, it's not like those Asians made that long journey just to have sex. It wasn't a conquest. They were probably just looking for food, and sex seemed like a good idea at the time. In any case, I have this crackpot theory that there really is no such thing as a pure race. Everyone is mixed. I think that's why my dad is called Caucasian. I'm sure that my mom is also probably mixed race. I mean, think about history. China has invaded and been invaded so many times that it's hard to believe that there wasn't a lot of sex going on between different so-called races. And we all know what is produced when people have sex: babies. Especially way back when the pill hadn't been invented and condoms were made of sheep's bladders. My parents never sat me down and explained the birds and the bees. They also never sat me down and told me what it meant to be of a certain race, or to not be of a certain race for that matter. In fact, I never really thought about race until I got to college. I didn't have to. I was lucky enough to make all my close friends when I was 5 years old, and when you're that young, neither the word nor the abstract concept of race has any meaning yet. I think it's pretty likely that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to get back to that childlike state, where race doesn't matter anymore. I try to convince myself that everyone else is also trying to reach that same point, but sometimes I wonder. For instance, the other day, a black man driving a gargantuan Cadillac told me to go back to China. I had mixed feelings about this racial slur. At first I was mad, because damn it, I was born in America. But then I just felt sorry for him, because I figured that he'd had racial insults directed at him for his whole life. But then I was mad again, because if that's the case, he should know better, shouldn't he? But I'd have to say that I've been very lucky so far in my life. I haven't had to deal with racism that much. At least I think I haven't. Maybe I just blot out all those bad experiences from my memory. It's funny how we can't really trust our memories, but at the same time, they are the only things which hold our life together. I don't know. You can drive yourself crazy thinking about all this stuff. I guess that's why I want to be like a kid again, when I didn't have to think about it all the time.
In our hearts we know that nothing's certain, but the pain we've taken from the light. And if hate stands in the way of forgiveness, then ye surely won't be sanctified. When it comes to you like the ways you felt back then, better to give in to love than to suffocate in your own hands. With the promise of a new day rising, we can rise and stand above our fear. And it's the fear that really has no purpose. When you realize this, the death of pain is near. So forget all